Oh. Oh. Hello, welcome back to another episode of the OAT Podcast. I'm your host, Abby, and today I have Madison Eshelman here with me.
Hello. Up to the mic. I already messed up.
Everyone does that. It kills me. I like sit here and I anticipate it. So for anyone who doesn't know Madison, I have actually known her since high school. We weren't really like friends, but like acquaintances. And you are the founder of Groundwork Coaching.
Yes.
That's the name of it, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I was like trying to do my research. But you're a wellness coach. And so like I just wanted to add like before, because I kind of want to pass it off to you to explain, because I feel like no one can explain it better than you. But for me personally, I've been following you on like social media and I love your page. Like so wellness coaching as far as like anxiety, traumas and stuff like that, like you really just make like big emotions feel so normal and like kind of like inclusive, I guess. So I love following you. So I like just up top, I recommend everyone following you.
Well, thank you.
But I would like you to just kind of, give like a high level, in-depth overview of kind of like what you do.
Well, first of all, I want to say to that, it's crazy to hear other people's perception of my page because to me, I like suck at it.
Really?
Like,
you think so?
Yeah. Like, I don't think I've posted in like 6 months like that I have like put a post of myself because it's my least favorite part of the job.
Okay.
And like ironically makes me anxious. So like,
of course.
like I went through a phase where I was like making all this content and really pushing it. And I think like, thankfully it's just like stays there. So anyone who would go can see all the content I used to make. But so it's just, anyways, I'm glad that you like it because I feel like I hate it.
Okay. Well, I mean, still follow her anyways. Yeah. And just be supportive. Don't be mean.
Yeah, don't be mean. Am I supposed to look at the camera?
If you want to, I sometimes do. Okay. It can be awkward, but don't feel obligated.
Yeah, okay. So Groundwork Coaching. So yeah, I'm an emotional wellness coach and I work with people one-on-one. I have a course. I have a journal, like a workbook.
Yep.
I mean, it's hard to talk about without saying why I got into it. So can I go there?
Yeah, that was going to be another question.
Okay. Because I feel like the background's really, really important. So
yeah, how did you get here? Because I know like you've had some traumas too. So
yes. So, my degree is in psychology and I was like working in social work and all of that, but I don't really credit that to why I'm into this. It's like just background, I guess, but it's not really why I'm doing what I'm doing. For me, when I like think back to the journey, and I thought about it a lot today because I was coming here, like, hey, how did I get to this point? I have always been a person who is just a seeker. I'm always like wanting to learn more about myself ever since high school. I've always like wanted to know more. And so what that led me to was just deconstructing my whole life, basically.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if you remember this, but in high school, I was like heavy into Christianity, like very, very religious.
Yep.
That was part of my seeking journey, right? That was just like one step in the process for me. And went to a Christian university, have my minors in biblical studies.
Oh, okay.
And my majors in psychology. And then graduated and deconstructed the whole thing.
Really?
And like kind of during my time there, honestly. So I deconstructed.
And you did graduate from there?
Yes, I graduated from there.
Okay.
Do not recommend. It was a shitty school. Anyways. But
I didn't know this.
Yeah. So I think just being so up close and like being forced to like really look at things and just seeing a lot of the corruption just kind of like invited me into as a seeker. I feel like a lot of people, it makes them uncomfortable to look at that stuff. So they just ignore it and they just keep going. I feel like most people live their life ignoring things.
Right.
But I was just dove head first and, months later had deconstructed the whole thing. And that was kind of like the first part of just like a dark night of the soul, just deconstructing that. And then following that, I deconstructed marriage because I was like, oh my God, I got married as a Christian.
And was he still Christian?
He actually was deconstructing before me, but was ashamed of that and like scared of that.
Yeah.
He like later shared with me that like he didn't really want to tell me the depths that he had deconstructed because he was afraid of like bringing me down. But then like there I was like,
right. Well, when you meet someone and you have these like strong beliefs and then you stop believing them, it's probably really scary to like be like, well, you know, is that the piece of me that they love?
Right. And to be honest, like that was a huge bonding point for us. That was a huge, I mean, who gets married at, I think I was 20.
Wow.
Or 21. We got engaged.
Either way.
Right. Either way. Either way is so
You're a
fucking
baby.
young. Yes. So that was a huge part of it. Like it wasn't even, it's just what you do.
Right.
Like anyone who goes to a Christian university or is like heavy into, it's just what you do.
Right.
And
especially like living in the Midwest, it's like very normal. Like I don't think anyone would have like blinked an eye at like
and
the
no
thought
one did.
of that. They're like, oh, you're in love, like get married.
Yeah, no one did either. And like in school, it was just kind of like, okay, I got engaged my junior year of college, and it was like, okay, come on. Like even that, I remember feeling like, okay, are we gonna do this? Because that was the bubble I was in,
right?
And that's all I knew. That was like what you did. So when I deconstructed all of that, I was like, holy shit, what the fuck did I do? And
that just gave me the chills.
Yeah. And then that came next. And I was like deconstructing marriage and sexuality. And it was just anything I could read, any book I could order, and just like peeling back everything. And then the more you do that, you realize that so much of who you think you are is conditioned.
Yes. I feel like I talk about that a lot on here because I feel like I discover a new me like every single year, every single day. Yeah. Like I'm constantly changing. And like sometimes like people go back and listen to the podcast and it makes me cringe a little bit because I'm like, what did I even say? Like I probably like don't believe like
I'm a different person than I was last week.
Exactly.
For sure.
I'm like, oh shoot.
Yeah. I feel that. So it was just kind of like deconstructing until I was like, I gotta go.
Yeah.
I gotta go. I'm sorry. And there's others. I mean, this could be like a 90-hour thing. But another little side note here is that when I was kind of going through this, I was also manic because I was really struggling with depression at this point in my life. And super long story, complicated story short, is that I had invited somebody who was a family friend who was an alcoholic to live with me and my at the time husband. And it was a shit show. Yeah. And it just drained my whole being. And it left me just so incredibly depressed and anxious, which then led me to go to a psychiatrist, which is, I'm mentioning this is an important part of my story. And rather than referring me to therapy, rather than asking me, how we can get to the root of getting my depression and anxiety solved, they just hand me some antidepressants. Then
this is a question that I have for you later. We'll come back to
it.
I
can't wait.
I want you to we'll have like 50 side tangents by the
Yes. So they gave me antidepressants, and I was getting feedback from Jordan, my husband at the time, and some of my friends, like, you're being kind of like just really like impulsive, and you're being kind of like, you're kind of being a little harsh, and like, and I was just like, to me, I was just like, well, I'm so sorry. I know you don't understand this. Keep in mind, a lot of them were like Christian, very uncomfortable with what I was doing. Yep. So it kind of got muddled because I was like, I know I'm making you uncomfortable. So it was hard to read, like, is there something actually wrong with me? Or like, am I just making you uncomfortable for my existence? And so I remember going back to the psychiatrist at the 2-month appointment, 3-month appointment, whatever it was, and saying, hey, my husband wants me to tell you that he thinks that I'm on too much of a dose and I'm kind of da-da-da. And they were like, okay, we'll give you a little questionnaire to see if you're on too much of a dose. And I remember that they asked me like 5 questions or something. And I like they were like, have you made any major decisions? And I was like, oh, well, I'm leaving my husband. I'm quitting my job. I bought a one-way ticket to Europe. But I just wasn't I wasn't happy. I just you know.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, we're gonna up your dose. They literally upped my dose.
What?
And I look back on that and I'm just like, holy shit, I'm glad it happened. And here's why. Because it has equipped me to do what I do now.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is the story of 90% of the people who come to me.
Yeah.
And
just wait for mine.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's just a fucking shit show.
Yeah.
And that's why I do what I do. A major part of why I do what I do is because there is not support. Even the professionals.
Yes.
And I'm just not shitting on all of them because there's amazing professionals out there.
Mm-hmm.
But there is just so much bullshit. You're nodding. You're understand. Okay. Yeah. So and then I actually was manic after that and left in kind of a shit show way, very detached from my emotions.
Yeah.
So have you been on antidepressants?
Yes, that's part of the story.
Okay. So were you detached from your emotions?
I wasn't on it long enough, but I would say there's like been another part of my life like where I probably should have like sought help and I completely disassociated from everything. And like in that time, like I lost my virginity because I just like didn't care anymore and was like drunk all the time, like making terrible choices. But I think it was more of a protection at that point for me.
Yeah. And it's not always one thing.
Right.
But for me, I know myself. When I was on this, I was a different person.
Yeah, I definitely was too, but just in a different way.
Yeah, totally. Which I think is interesting because I feel like a lot of people, it makes them more depressed, more suicidal. I've heard from a lot of people.
Yeah. Do you want me to just get into it?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was like, well, I promise I'll loop back. But I did want to ask you like your thoughts on, because like they're SSRIs, right?
Yep.
So I forget what it stands for.
Serotonin
inhibitors or something.
Yeah.
Something.
Yeah.
So like, and I truly believe that a lot of my depression was stemmed from being on birth control, which I can go off on a whole nother tangent about that. I still believe in it, but for me, it's like, I really thought I was like bipolar on it because like I couldn't handle my emotions and I would have really, really low lows on it. And so I went to just my primary care like doctor. And I was like, hey, I'm like struggling with like anxiety and I think a little bit of depression. And they asked me 10 questions and she like is marking it with a pen and paper. And she's like, okay. And like I originally like went in for anxiety and she's like, you're like severely depressed. I'm like, oh, you don't say.
Oh man.
And like with a splash of anxiety. And she just wrote me a prescription, didn't ask me a single question. And was like, here, go ahead. So she prescribed me Wellbutrin. And I've like told the full story on this, like on the podcast at some point. So like, I don't know, go find it. Or if anyone's curious, I can give you the episode. But essentially I was on it for 2 weeks. I became insomniac completely. They didn't ask me what my lifestyle was like. And on the weekends, I tend to be like a heavier drinker. I would have like 2 drinks and would black out, but not stop drinking. Yeah. And I made crazy, like weird decisions that I wouldn't normally do. And so I called and I was like, hey, I'm like not sleeping. What's going on? And they're like, okay, let me ask you a couple of questions. Are you feeling fatigued? I'm like, I just said I wasn't sleeping. Of course I am. Like, they're like, are you like more sad? I'm like, yes, I'm more sad because like you can't regulate your emotions when you're tired. It was so crazy. Yeah. They wanted to prescribe me sleeping pills then. And I was like, no.
It's an endless,
they're like, well,
loop.
don't just take yourself off of it. And I'm like, I've been taking it for 2 weeks. I'm done. Yeah. So I stopped taking that. I stopped taking birth control. And I mean, like I still have like emotions for sure. And I've been through a lot of shit, like which like we'll probably talk about today. But like I'm not like depressed anymore, I would say, for the most part.
Congrats.
Thanks. But yeah, that's my story.
Yeah, I mean that's so many people's story. Like I'm not even shocked.
Right.
It's just what it is.
And I really thought like a psychiatrist had to prescribe. But my primary caregiver just...
Yep. My primary care has also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were going through your whole story.
Yes. So
it's like how you got here.
Okay. So I was on... Yep. I got on medication. They upped it. I was manic. yada yada. Okay, so I left.
Yep.
I left my husband. At that time I was just separated. I was like, I just need to figure out who the fuck I am.
Yeah.
Like separate from all of this.
Mhm.
And I just needed to figure it out. So I did the traditional backpacking through Europe situation.
Okay.
At this time I went home and I had stopped the medication cold turkey because I just wanted to make sure that I was okay.
Right.
You know? And what happened when I got off the medication is I was still very like pleased with my decision to leave. It felt very aligned for me. It felt like I'm doing the right things. The difference is the emotion hit. And I think that was probably, I mean, I feel like it's like regret's not the right word. Sadness, grief is the right word for that, because you know how painful that must have been for him, for me to leave very detached and very matter of fact. Because that was only half the story. Like there was like that part of it, but then there was also like the grief. So anyways, the grief hit and I was like moving through all of that and freaking figuring out who I was and traveling and
but I also still feel like you're probably still trying to figure yourself out, right?
Always.
Like I feel like it's an always self-discovery and things change and you change and but I think like what some people don't do is they don't even like do the inward looking.
Yes.
Which is like really key in my opinion.
And I think like going, as cliche as it is, like leaving and traveling and like being by myself and like spending days in a country by myself, just walking around and like getting dinner by myself. It's like you have to sit with yourself. You have to like be able to tolerate yourself, which means you have to look at that. And that was really crazy for me to do. And then that continued when I came back, of course, because now I'm just like, you know, like back in my hometown after I was gone for, I don't know, like 7 or 8 years. I don't really actually, something like that.
Yeah.
A long time. And then we decided to get a divorce. So then I'm grieving that. And I felt very like intentional with that grief and just like very present with it. And I felt like I was like a life of trauma that I know I didn't really get into.
Yeah.
This is a story for another day. A life of just like bullshit.
Yeah.
Like one bullshit thing after another, after another, after another. And then I just was like, I'm starting my life. I'm starting my life and I'm starting it different. And I'm not going to like focus on my trauma anymore. I'm like putting my next foot forward. And then Jordan, my ex-husband, died by suicide. And it fucking destroyed me.
Yeah.
It absolutely destroyed me.
Yeah.
So that was the next part of my darkness.
How long after you guys actually divorced did that happen?
That's a good question. I'm notoriously bad at timelines just in general, and then specifically around this probably even worse because how painful it is. But it had been a while. I mean, we were both in new relationships.
Okay.
It'd been a while.
Okay. Okay. So I do feel, I mean, did you feel any sort of guilt?
100%.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a major, major journey for me. Yeah. And two, other like people blamed me. Like it was a whole thing. And like now, like I've done so much healing to get where I am now to look at those people with like genuine compassion and understanding. But like it was not always the case. Like it was a very painful thing for me. Like that his family and friends, some of his friends, and like straight up told me that it was my fault.
I think suicide in general is one of the hardest deaths to grieve and process. Like death in general is just a really hard concept in my opinion. And so I'm sure they were probably just trying to like understand it in their mind and put that blame somewhere.
Yeah. And I think, again, every step of my journey has equipped me to do the work that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because as fucked as that was, I see that there was a very valuable lesson in that for me, which I had to go through that time period of being blamed, because what that did to me is it made me have to find validation in myself.
Right.
And in a way that everyone kind of talks about, like, oh, you have to love yourself, you have to validate yourself. And this was like, if I'm going to survive this, I have to literally learn how to not believe what other people say about me.
Yeah.
And make peace with myself.
Yep.
Because it was basically like me, like this kind of intense manic energy of like, no, but like, I need to convince you, I need to convince you, I need to convince you, I need to convince you. And it was like, I was convincing myself.
Right.
And
because they were saying it to you, like a piece of you, like you trying to convince them otherwise, like a piece of you probably like believed it too.
Yeah, for sure. And that was what was so freeing for me, is I was like, if I had peace with myself, I wouldn't need them to see me.
Right.
And I like remember like what that felt like. I remember what it felt like to like have that aha moment of like, oh my God, like it doesn't matter what they think.
Yeah.
Like you can say that and know that logically, but I remember like experientially, like it was like, oh no, this is a journey for me. Like this is for me.
Right. And I've like heard somewhere too that like true, you know, like the self-love talk is like looking at the pieces of yourself that you love, number one, but then also like the pieces of you that like, you know, like air quote can be bad.
Right.
And still giving yourself love.
Yes.
You know, like whether that's like someone, like if you're gossiping too much or you can be rude to like your mother sometimes, it's like still acknowledging that like you still love yourself is like really like important.
Like loving your shadow parts.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Loving your rejected parts.
So I know that you were saying that kind of led you all here. Is there anything else? I don't want to cut you off on your journey.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Okay. Yes. This is like the most important thing. So.
Okay. Glad I asked.
It's hard to keep on track in my mind. So like this was like the dark night of the soul, like none other. It's like where I thought I had been. It's like doesn't even show in comparison. Yeah. I mean, this required me to like deconstruct absolutely everything, to like hope and love. Like what is even hope? What is even like what is love? Like these deep existential questions. And it was the loneliest, scariest, like literally just pure terror to be in that place. And I am so lucky because I have this mentor that I've had for years and years and years, who also happens to be a therapist. And I just like, what was so impactful for me is I remember I was very suicidal, extremely suicidal. That's an important piece to this. And it was just like, I remember just feeling like everyone wanted to help me. No one wanted to hurt me. Right. Well, besides the people who blamed me. Yeah. But like no one in my circle like wanted to hurt me. Everyone wanted me to be okay, but no one knew how to help me. I made everyone so afraid, like to be like, I don't want to live anymore. Yeah. That's a terrifying thing for the people you love to hear.
Right.
But what my mentor was able to do for me was say, I know. Like that makes sense. And I just like
validate your emotions.
Yes. In that moment, like I'm summarizing like months and months and months of hell. But like, I feel like this is a point that I want to get to, which was like so impactful for me, is I was like, I want to die. You don't understand. This is torture. This is horrible. I will never recover from this. And she just was like, yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, thank God. Like you fucking thank you for understanding that this is valid. Like, thank you for understanding that my wish to not be here is actually valid. And I feel like that was like a very major step for me in realizing that like what she gave to me that day and what she continued to give me was like what I wanted to give to other people.
Right.
Because while other people want to do that, people go and they want to be therapists, right? And that's great. It's noble, amazing. Having this experience, having the experiences that I've had, and like being at rock bottom and deconstructing everything, and the bravery that took, is what equips me to meet other people there,
right?
Without judging them, because it's like I get it.
Yep.
I fucking get it.
Yep.
And there's so much more there.
So personally for me, like I'm right there with you. I've been through like a lot of shit like back in the day. I still go through some stuff. A lot of it is like with parents and like things that were like totally out of my control. And like what I always like to talk about like on the podcast is how especially like where we grew up, it seemed like everyone's lives were like so perfect. And yeah, exactly. Which like now like talking about it, I've actually had people like from high school like reach out and like say like, yeah, like that was my experience too, which is like really validating.
Yeah.
But it's like people don't talk about this stuff. Like I feel like it's so like for that mentor to be like, I see you, I hear you, and I understand and I get it. It's like that's probably so validating because it's just not normal to talk about it. And like I love that like you go on, you know, your social media and like you're coming on here and being so open and honest about it because it's like I think that's what really helps people.
Yeah. I think you can only be as honest with other people as you're willing to be with yourself. And that's why people don't talk about it.
Right.
Is because like it's fucking terrifying to go there with yourself.
Right.
And like that is the perfect explanation of why I want to do what I'm doing. It is terrifying to do it by yourself. I needed that support in that time. And like that is why I was able to survive that.
Right.
And that's what I want to give to other people any way that I can.
Right. So like I guess what you do, is it therapy or you said it's coaching? Can you explain?
Coaching.
Okay.
Therapy requires a license.
Okay.
And while I will be licensed in the near future,
congrats.
I am a coach.
Okay.
And that's just because I'm not a licensed professional. So anyone who works with me signs a consent form that says that they understand that this is basically recreational.
Yep.
And I am not a licensed professional yet. And and that they're just consenting to work with me on that level. Yeah.
Okay. And then you said you have like a program. Is that what you said? Or like a course?
So I have a course. Not everyone who I work with does it because I only recommend it to certain people that I work with.
Okay.
You know, because if somebody's coming, people come to me for a lot of different things. It started off that I was a grief coach and that's what my niche was. And then people were like, hey, I'm not like grieving, but like I'm really sad. And I'm like, okay, I need to change. The name of my business used to be Grief and Groundwork.
Okay.
And I actually rebranded and changed for that reason because I was like, I called it Grief and Groundwork mainly because I found that like underneath people's depression and anxiety was unprocessed grief, unprocessed feeling, I should say. And I lost my train of thought. Where was I going with that? What did you ask me?
The course.
The course.
Yes.
So the course, something that I'm really passionate about in my work is teaching everyone what I know. Because I hated the dynamic and I get a lot of feedback from people that like when they go into therapy, it's kind of this like power issue. Like people feel so intimidated by the idea of therapists. There's a lot of like, you know, taboo. It's really taboo to like, and I think a lot of that has to do with this like hierarchy.
Okay.
But like where people are like, oh, you're psychoanalyzing me. And like, what is it that you're thinking about me that you're not telling me? Or you're like trying to like trick me into like figuring this thing out about myself. And for that reason, I do this course to teach them everything I know to remove that struggle.
Oh, okay.
So that when I am calling out, like I'm huge on like noticing defenses from our emotions. Like my whole thing is like, you know, underneath our depression, underneath our anxiety, underneath our low self-worth, underneath our like self-sabotaging behavior and our lack of motivation is our inability to face our emotions because we were never taught how to face them, sit with them, move through them.
Right.
And so that's what I teach in my course, you know, and it's technically broken down into like a 12-week thing. Some people will do it and spread it for like 20 weeks. Some people will, you know, I just broke it down that way just to have it. But, you know, it's so that when we're in session, it's not like I know all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm very transparent and I'm referring, hey, remember video 3 when we talked about this? Okay, that's what's happening right now. And then it's not like I'm psychoanalyzing them.
Right.
They're like, oh, okay.
They can kind of do it themselves then.
They can kind of do it themselves, and we're working together on like, do you see this pattern that like
right.
I was talking about? So that's what the course is, and the purpose of the course is to be doing that like video or like videos and guided meditations and these things to bring self-awareness and on like knowledge, so that when knowledge on these certain things, so that when we come together, they're less intimidated.
So I was just listening to like another podcast that you were on, and so I don't want to cover everything that you already covered in that, but you were talking, I want to say it was like the triangle.
The change triangle.
My
best friend in the whole world.
Do you want to give a brief overview of that? And then I have like another point.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So the change triangle. I could talk about this for literally 72 hours. So I'll give him. Okay. So the change triangle changed my life. The top left-hand corner is our defenses.
Okay.
Anything we do to avoid our emotions. Scrolling on social media, binge drinking, gossiping, you name it, right? We all have them. Standing in the shower and just staring at the ground so I don't have to go face something. Those are like kind of these obvious things. Self-criticism, blaming, etc.
Right.
The top right-hand corner of this change triangle is our inhibitory emotions. Okay. This is what changes everything, because a lot of people don't know this. They think you're either in defense or you're feeling, and that's it. Okay. The top right-hand corner is inhibitory emotions, which is anxiety, shame, and guilt. Okay. This was a game changer for me with all of my shame and guilt around Jordan's death. So an inhibitory emotion, I give it this analogy of a guard dog. So if you imagine anxiety, all of your anxious symptoms, imagine it as a guard dog. This dog is meant to protect you. This dog is meant to keep you safe. Oh, okay. And so you see your little guard dog, which lives in your mind, that has the name tag anxiety or the name tag depression. And when it perceives a threat, meaning there doesn't always have to be one, when it perceives a threat based on what it's learned, just how dogs do, right?
The body keeps a score.
Yep. It reacts and says, hey, I love you. I care about you. Watch out. Okay. That is your anxiety symptoms.
Yeah. Okay. That makes so much sense.
So my heart starts racing because that's the equivalent of the dog barking.
Yep.
Okay. It's just
I've never thought about it that way.
Yes. The dog is barking. It's just getting your attention because it loves you.
Yeah.
It cares because your body cares, right? It's just trying to protect you.
You just you naturally want to survive. It's like a survival mechanism.
Your brain's number one, it only cares about survival.
Right.
Like that's what the brain cares about.
Yeah.
And so when this guard dog barks, you have these symptoms, but the problem is that what people do is they punish the dog or they punish the mechanism that the dog is trying to protect, which is yourself, your body. And they're like, and so we either ignore the dog and try and move to the top left-hand corner and just drink ourselves till we can't hear the dog anymore. But the dog, when we're sober, the dog is still trying to get our attention. Yeah. And so that we have this really toxic relationship with our anxiety, which is actually trying to protect us, which is actually just an alarm system. Okay. And I want you to view anxiety, shame, and guilt as the same. Okay. And I throw depression in there as well. I think I throw depression more in the top left-hand corner because I think when anxiety gets intolerable, we kind of just go to, I'm just going to turn off the system. I'm just going to shut down the self.
Yeah, that does happen to me.
Yeah. And I want to be clear because sometimes people get defensive when I talk about this because they're like, depression is not a defense mechanism. It is, and listen, I get it. Okay. Yeah. I understand. We become very attached to these labels, but so much of what I want to do is for people to know that is not actually who you are. Right. And there is so much power in that not being who you are. And that does not minimize that defense is very valid.
Right. I actually, not to interrupt you, but I actually, so I know like in the beginning of this, I was like, I'm not depressed anymore, but I do have like depressed days, I would say. Sure. Yeah. 'Cause emotions are real. Yeah. And I've like never really understood what like people would call like clinically depressed or like where they think like it's just like in their brain. Like mine's more like I have like these huge emotions and that's causing me to feel that deeply. So I think that is interesting because like maybe I have like analyzed myself too much and so like now I know I'm depressed. I don't know.
Well, I would say even like there's still a lot of people who believe and I'm sure you've heard this new coming out of like, it's not a chemical imbalance in the brain.
Yeah.
It's like it's not caused by a chemical reaction in your brain.
Where we all thought that's
right
what it was, and then that's
right.
why SSRIs or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah. And I was going
are supposed to work.
Yeah. And I was going on podcasts before that came out saying this, and people were getting so pissed at me.
Yeah.
And then this thing came out and I was like, hell yeah.
Like, told you so.
But it's a symptom.
Yeah.
So like, it's not like those
Right.
they're not crazy. Like,
yeah.
And everyone really just wants to put language to their experience. And that's
Yeah.
wonderful. And
Yeah.
I understand. But that takes the power away
Right.
from our ability to change it.
Mhm.
And that is something that I'm really passionate about. So the change triangle. Sorry, I'll bring it back.
Yep. Thanks.
So our inhibitory emotions. So what are these top of the triangle protecting us from? It's the bottom of the triangle, which is our core emotions,
Okay.
which is fear, anger, sadness, disgust, joy, excitement, and sexual excitement.
Okay.
When any of those core emotions feel unsafe, which for most people, unless you had a really in a bubble childhood with very highly emotionally intelligent parents that were more emotional intelligent than their whole generation, we don't have
which is
that.
never the case.
We don't have that.
Yeah.
That's what gentle parenting is attempting to do, which is beautiful and amazing.
Mhm.
But if you're our age or older, and probably even younger, that's not what you were exposed to.
Even like my friends that like I would say seemingly had like a great childhood,
right?
Like they still talk to me about like things that like their parents did that like didn't even like their parents truly weren't trying to do that,
yes,
and it still
yeah.
did it to them. You know, it's like you can only do so much.
And I think this is really hard for parents to hear because they instantly write like, what do you mean? I was such a good parent. Right. And it's like, yeah, you literally did. Let's just acknowledge you did the best you could with what you had.
That's what I always say.
And evolution. We weren't there yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like humans were not there yet. We had not yet understood.
Yeah. They didn't have the internet like we did.
Yeah. And like, this is just part of our evolution as humanity is this awareness and understanding neuroplasticity and understanding the mind. I mean, it's no one's fault.
Right.
Like, I feel like that's really important to say. Like,
well, and chances are like, so for me, it's like, I think part of like my growth with what I went through as a child is like kind of having empathy and forgiving my parents, because it's like, okay, let's like peel this back. It's like, what were their parents like?
Right.
What did they go through as children?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just glad that now I have like the resources and tools like where we're all talking about it, and we can go on podcasts and talk about it and listen to it and hear like 50,000 other people talk about it. But they didn't have that. And so it's like, I couldn't imagine not having these resources. Like I probably like the generational trauma would have continued with me.
Absolutely.
I mean, not that I have a child or anything at this point, who knows? But yeah, I don't know. I think it's like, that's where I give a lot of empathy towards them.
Yeah. And I think that's a reaction of understanding this for sure.
Yeah.
It's freedom from that. But yeah, so I think I have yet to meet a person who doesn't have a repressed emotion from the bottom of the triangle.
Right.
And what's hard about it is that with repressed emotions, they are repressed, meaning you don't know that they're repressed. You don't know. Sometimes you can. Sometimes you, like, some people can have awareness, right? Of like, yeah, I'm a chronic people pleaser and I feel very, 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 very uncomfortable with anger. Like some people would have that awareness.
Yeah.
But what I see with people is they come to me and they're maybe anxious, they're maybe depressed, they maybe hate themselves, and they have no clue why. But when we dig in, and that's a whole other thing on how we do that. But when we dig in,
it's part of what I want to talk to you about.
There's a reason they associate fear with weakness.
Yeah.
Sadness wasn't safe because XYZ. Anger was moralized. And they might not even know. They might not even consciously, this is the craziest part of this work, you might not even be consciously aware. But if you have the symptom and we go looking, we're going to find one.
Yeah.
And anxiety and depression is the symptom.
Okay. So that's what I wanted, my like follow-up question to like the triangle.
Yeah.
So on this episode, you were explaining how a lot of times you will create like a safe space, have them close their eyes, etc., and then like picture like where they first experienced this. You know, they could have been 4 years old, etc.
Mhm.
And so I wanted to ask you. So for me personally, I haven't done anything like this personally, but even just like guided meditation for me ends in like me like being fucked up from it. Like I don't like to meditate because like I cry almost every time.
Yeah.
And so then like listening to you say this and I'm like, okay, should I be digging deeper and actually figuring this out, or is that too traumatizing? I'm like, I can't figure out, like, so I like wanted to ask you like
Absolutely.
what your thoughts were.
I think that is definitely the case for people with complex trauma, and that's why being in a contained, safe relationship is everything. And you know, like everyone needs something different, and I will just be fully transparent. Like people who come to me, like there's people all over the spectrum. There are some people who we take the most microscopic. There's no way we're getting into meditation.
Yeah.
Not a fucking chance, because we can even talk about it with the panic coming up. And so where I would start with you, if I can say, because I think this might be helpful, is we would just start by tolerating the sensations as we talk about it. Okay. And I wouldn't even have you get into anything deep. Okay. Right. Like something that's like a 2 or a 3 out of 10. Okay. 4 out of 10.
But it's so weird because I can talk about it.
Yeah. But have you had somebody poke on it?
I poke at it myself. It's so weird. Like I can talk about it. I can dissect it. Like
So where does the pain come for you? Where does the overwhelming pain come for you? Is it in the visualization?
I don't know. I think I heard somewhere about meditation specifically that when you're getting into that state, it's like allowing like your neural pathways to keep moving. And I'm going to butcher this, so you probably know better than I do. And that it's like not always helpful. And it can be more hurtful.
Absolutely.
And maybe that's just because I'm doing it on my own. I don't know if I do it with a professional, and I've considered doing like EMDR therapy, the rapid eye movement therapy. So I don't know. I've also honestly considered reaching out to you, and I just didn't know if it would be awkward because I know you.
No, I would love to. I would love to. But I think with this, talking about it is like this is what I feel like you were getting to, is like when you go into that meditative state, your defenses that we talked about, the top left and top right hand corner, they go away.
Okay. Yep.
And you're just left with what is, and what is these emotions that have been underneath the surface for a very long time, and that is traumatizing. That I would not recommend you do that.
No.
Because that's too much all at once. You need to first build trust with your body.
Okay.
And
which I do work on that.
Yeah. And just like body awareness. Have you done stuff with that and like embodiment?
I don't know. I feel like I have come like a long way since like I was like a child, like as far as like not talking about it at all. Like I definitely like know my triggers for the most part, and know I react to certain things, and know I do certain things. Like it all stems from some point of my trauma.
So you have logical understanding.
Yes.
So which is great. I think that's wonderful. Awareness is everything. When it comes to actually healing this shit, so you don't get to the point where you're like, to relieve the symptoms and to relieve this major trauma response that you get when you think about this, it is feeling.
Okay.
Everything that I do, and you know, it takes a lot of time to get here. So this is not like, oh, just feel it. I mean, you know, well, like, but I'm oversimplifying.
I do cry a lot,
but I'm oversimplifying it to you know, like, even, and this is, I'm glad you said that. I do cry a lot, because even people will come to me and they will say like, I cry all the time. What do you mean I have repressed emotion? Okay. You still might not be getting down to the thing. For me, this might be helpful to give a little bit of background. I'm going to use myself in the change triangle to make this make sense. So I was extremely suicidal, suicidality, top left-hand corner. I'm going to kill off myself rather than feel my murderous rage towards someone else. Okay. I want to shut down and kill off myself because I can't manage to go to the bottom of the triangle. Okay. Keep in mind, I needed support with this. This is not something I could have ever done on my own. That's very important that I say that. So what would happen when my mentor tried to pull me and say, who are you mad at? Who are you mad at? Come down here. You're showing anger towards yourself.
Right.
You're in the top left-hand corner. If you would just let yourself be angry, who were you angry at? Who are you angry at? And then I would go to the top right-hand corner and I'd be so shamed and guilty. I'm not, like I couldn't tolerate being angry at him for killing himself.
Yeah, you couldn't admit it.
I couldn't. It was so shameful. And even though, like, logically, logic doesn't matter here. Even though logically I could understand that, my body was experiencing something different. Logically, I'm like, oh, I can be angry at him. Of course I'm angry at him. But feeling that was entirely different for me. So like where this all clicked for me, and when I was like, this is what I'm doing with my life, was I remember I called my mentor. This was one of many times that I called my mentor, like hella suicidal, just not okay.
Yeah.
And I'm going to totally oversimplify it, but over this time she was like, who are you angry at? Get angry. And I was like, I'm not. And I would like sob. So I was feeling in that case, sobbing.
Like your body was even like fully reacting.
Totally reacting. And she called me out and she said, Madison, you are crying as a defense right now. And I was so fucking pissed at her.
So maybe that's why I'm crying all the time.
Yes. Even crying can be a defense. So, but what happened was she invited me to get angry at him. It was terrifying. I would cry and go in defense, bounce. I would bounce back and forth literally like every millisecond. I would tap into my anger for a second and then go up here. And some people can like talk about their anger and they're like, what do you mean? I'm talking like, yes, I'm angry at my mom. I'm so angry at my mom.
Right.
And I'm like, interesting. Where's the feeling? You're not feeling it here. Yeah, I am. My heart's racing. There's such a different, and this is so hard to explain until you experience it, because I'm also like imagining like listening to this as a listener and how it could feel maybe confusing.
Right.
For me, I
know I would be curious like how I would get there.
And that's why like support is so important.
Yeah.
For me, what that was, and this is graphic, for me it was murderous rage towards him. And this is what was true. I was turning my murderous rage in towards myself. That is suicidality.
Right.
I couldn't tolerate, what I wanted to do was kill him from how much he hurt me. I wanted to murder him.
That's like really powerful.
Yeah. He stole my life. Yeah. And that it was like, you ruined everything. I have chills. Like
I sometimes feel like my parents did that to me.
And I think a lot of people feel that.
It's making me emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we can face that, then we get to free ourselves from that.
Right.
What's happening for you?
I mean, like, okay, so like I feel like I relate to a lot of this because it's like I can have empathy towards it, but I think like a lot of the times it's like I can't change what happened. So it's like I a lot of times try to focus on like moving forward, but I do sometimes still feel like resentment and pain for like the little girl that I never got to experience a normal childhood. And so then like I like feel sad for that person, almost like it's like I'm watching a movie and it's like that little girl just needed protected and no one protected her. And like my sister as well, like we just needed protection. And that's like really sad.
And the fact that you have like resentment, it's repressed anger, my friend. Yeah. And I feel like you point, like, it's really important. Like when you were like, I have empathy and I understand I have perspective. Like it doesn't need to be either or.
Okay.
That's rushing to the finish line. And and like so many people will come to me and be like, oh, I've made peace. I have closure with that. And I'm like, try me.
Oh yeah. I know I don't.
Right. And like, it's like, it's like this rush to the finish line. I get it. It's so uncomfortable. And people think like, because they have a logical, we call this intellectualizing, because I have a logical understanding that my parents did the best they could with what they had, does not take away my anger.
Right.
I logically understand.
And it doesn't invalidate my experience either.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I understand why Jordan ended his life because I was there I in my own. And let me tell you, it would have been the easiest fucking decision I could have ever made.
Right.
I understand.
Yeah.
And I'm fucking angry. And it doesn't need to be either. Black and white thinking, top left-hand corner. Anytime you try to say it's one thing or another thing, nuance is the bottom of the triangle. That is where grief is.
Okay.
And that's why you got choked up.
Yeah.
Because you were seeing it's not black and white.
Right.
It's not just that I understand. It's that I understand and have empathy and I'm fucking pissed.
Yeah. Literally.
It's both of them.
Yeah.
And that brought you down to the bottom of the triangle. And for my example that I was giving, expressing my anger towards him and really feeling it like in a painful way, rather than just being like, yeah, I'm fucking pissed. You know, that's different than feeling it, how you just experienced it.
Yeah.
That is where we can heal.
Mm-hmm.
And I got off the phone, not suicidal at all.
Oh,
I was ready to end my life. I got off that phone call excited for my life because I was able to realize that it wasn't my anger towards me. It was my anger towards him. And I then went to go do this. I went to go see somebody who specializes in this technique that I'm talking about in Austin, Texas. And I flew there to get like a 3-hour thing to do this with my dad. Not with him. Tap into my repressed anger towards my dad.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
And it,
yeah. Like inner child work almost, or
what I like, yes, inner child work. But what I'm talking about more specifically is tapping into these deeply repressed emotions, because a lot of therapy and a lot of flack therapy is like, I don't want to just talk about it.
Yeah.
I've been in therapy for 5 years and I'm not getting anywhere. Like, how many people come to me as the last resort and say, like, I've had 5 therapists.
Yeah.
And we've talked about the same shit. I know it's my mom. I know it's my dad. Yep. I know it's this trauma.
It's intellectualizing it again.
Yeah. And it's like, and again, I don't think I'm some genius. I just think I experienced it. Yeah. Like, I'm not trying to like say that I'm better than this. It's just like I have like you
have different tools.
I went through these things, and it's made me able to deeply understand this. So I don't want to just talk to you about it. In fact, just talking, because I've been there, I know how shitty that feels to have to keep recalling the same shit over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And so what I'm talking about specifically is, and what I do and what the change triangle does, is getting to these deeply repressed emotions rather than just reliving the trauma.
Right.
Because that's not helpful.
Right. I do have 2 questions for you. So I'm just going to like up top do a reminder, and then I'm going to hit pause over here in a second. But one is about like my experience with therapy and just my thoughts on it. And then the other is about like trauma and healing from trauma. Okay, so I wanted to get your take on this because like I have like my own opinion, but I feel like you experience like working with like people with trauma every single day. One of my friends, so like basically like a couple episodes ago, I was like talking about just some feelings that had popped up, and I was talking about like my traumas and how like I live with them every day. And like in my personal opinion, I feel like traumas are kind of like a scar. Like you might still see it, but like you can kind of like work on it and it'll still live with you forever, but like it's still there. But my friend was saying how she's like, oh, normally like when I talk with people about something like this, it seems that like they have healed and it's like a past tense when they talk about trauma. And like she came like from a very good place. Like I think she was just checking in on me to make sure. She's like, I feel like there was more you had to say, et cetera, et cetera. And so like in your opinion, do you really feel like we can like have trauma as a past tense? Like even though everything you've been through, like do you still feel like you carry it with you? Or is it something we can leave in the past once we work through it?
That's a really good question. I think that you can heal it. I want to be careful with that because that doesn't mean it's not with you.
Right.
This is what I'll say.
Okay.
When you experience trauma, it dysregulates the fuck out of your nervous system. That is in you. That is in your body. That is in like locked in your mind. But I know like I wouldn't do what I do now if it wasn't possible to heal that.
Right.
Because why else is someone going to pay me and come to me each week to talk about the shittiest parts of their lives to not have like something positive come out of it? So this is what I'll say about my experience is where my trauma had a hold on my life. literally ran my whole life.
Yep.
Whereas now, years out from this particular loss, it doesn't rule my life.
Mm-hmm.
It will always be there.
Right.
It will always be awful and sad, but it won't rule my life.
Okay.
And that's how I would describe it.
Okay.
Is that like, yeah, it happened to you, and it's never going to be pleasant that these things happen to you. It's never going to be a positive.
Yeah, you'll never be happy to think about it or
no, and nor should we.
It.
Like, why should we? But I think there is a way to genuinely make peace with our trauma.
Okay,
I believe that.
Okay,
yeah,
and I really feel like, I mean, I do know, that there's things that I could still work on. Like, I feel like I've gotten myself to this point without like doing the deep work.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, like, so I'm definitely like in a good spot, way better than what I used to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm like, I just like have always thought like, oh, like it's like a scar. It's like it'll always be there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it made me who I literally am.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know who I was before trauma.
Right. I talk about this a lot as like our wounds.
Mm-hmm.
And I have the trigger tracking journal. What I was talking about is one of the tools that kind of like walks through this exact concept for this reason, because it can be kind of abstract for people. But how I describe it is like anytime you're getting triggered because of our trauma, like, right, it is like anytime anything triggers you, it's just scratching your infected wound.
Okay.
It's infected. That's why it hurts.
Yeah.
If I touch your scar, it doesn't hurt.
So it's not actually healed. Right.
Like if you are triggered, so if you say something to me and I feel triggered about it, you just scratched a wound. So I say triggers are a teacher.
Yeah.
Triggers just show us what's still unhealed.
So this makes me feel like I'm not healed at all.
No, it's not. Give yourself credit. You've come a long way.
I know, but like it's making me actually think like, yeah, maybe there's a lot more work that
I think there's probably an infection in there.
Yeah.
And that wound is not healed, or else you wouldn't get triggered.
Right.
And this does not even mean just our big traumas, by the way.
Yeah.
Like this is literally just like little like dumb shit that triggers you. Like there is just like stuff like you're just dysregulated. Like, right, you can get triggered because like you didn't get enough sleep and you're hungry, right? That's not what I'm talking about. But like somebody at work says something and you're just like, ew, I hate them. Like, why would, and you're like judging them. They triggered something. Yeah. They triggered an unhealed part of you, or else you would not be judging them. Right. And that's what I mean by like small things. Like, okay, if you, and like, I'll do this with clients where it's like we follow it back through guided meditation or whatever their capacity is. We'll follow it back. And it's like, oh my gosh. Right. I don't give myself permission to not know what I'm doing at work. And I judge myself because my dad, and then, you know, and we have this deeper understanding. It's like, even the things that we think are just like, no, that person's just annoying. Yeah. It's like, it's about an unhealed wound in you. Yeah. So I promise I'll go back to the other question, but now that we're here, I did know that you have like a trigger tracking journal. Yes. And I was like thinking about this, like, maybe like I really could have probably used that like in my early 20s when I didn't even really understand the concept of like I was being triggered left and right, but I didn't even know it. Yeah. And so now I like logically like know a lot of my triggers and I can work through it and process it. So that way, like I don't have this big catastrophic reaction to them, which is huge that you were able to do that. Like, oh my God, that's because it was bad before. Yeah. But so one thing that like, so like every year, like I kind of like try to like set an intention of like something I really want to work on that I've noticed that like isn't like a healed piece of me. And so one thing that I have really been, and it's not in a forceful way at all, like if it naturally happens, I let it come. But one thing that I like really wanted to try to work on is like connecting and being vulnerable with men specifically, because I could never be vulnerable with anyone. And then I worked on being vulnerable with my friends, like my girlfriends. I started there, and then I got comfortable with that, and now I can literally be so vulnerable with like any woman out there. And then like the piece that like I found that was really, really hard for me was being vulnerable
vulnerable with men. And so one of the last guys, like I was just kind of like seeing, I was like, okay, like I'm just going to start opening up to him. And I like shared this like really vulnerable story. And like his response was like nearly perfect. So like it wasn't like, I don't even think it was him triggering me. Maybe, I have no clue, but I cried the rest of the day.
Yeah.
Like, and I was just like, I can normally figure out where like the emotion is coming from and why, but I could not figure that out. No clue.
We could.
I was going to say, where would you even start with that?
Well, it's hard in this setting.
Yeah.
I'd
have to give you more details probably.
No, I think just vaguely what I would invite you to do, and we don't need to do it now.
Yeah.
Is that like if you just kind of like sit with that in your body, we don't even need to go to meditation.
Right.
Like I would like, I always say one hand on chest, one hand on stomach. I can't do that because I have a mic in my hand.
Yeah.
But just like, I would say like, okay, can you tolerate just like being there? Take me back there and just feel what you felt in your body
Right.
in that moment.
I was just sad, literally, the whole day.
And where did you feel that in your body?
That's a good question.
Again, it's hard to do in this setting.
Yeah.
But like, because like if you didn't have a mic in your hand and we
Right.
were really able to dive into this, like our body keeps the score.
Yep.
It is so intelligent. We have not been taught how to listen to our bodies, and people are absolutely flabbergasted, like how simple sometimes when we actually just slow down with the help of another person to like go there and feel into the body, like, what is this?
Right.
Your body will tell you. And there's tons of unique, fun little creative ways that we can have your body tell you what was happening, but it will tell you what was happening.
Okay.
Is that too abstract?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, like, I didn't, like, I do have, like, personal questions, but I don't want this to be, like, a therapy
No, you
session.
absolutely. No,
I just, like, feel like if I give examples of, like,
For
what
sure.
I've been through, you can, like, maybe, like, just, like, help the listeners, like, and give
Why
your
not? Yeah,
personal
let's do it.
thoughts. So,
Uh-huh.
so, yeah. Okay, y'all. So that ends part 1 of my interview with Madison. I hope everyone's liking it. Definitely tune in to next week. I don't know. I feel like this whole thing was like a lot of therapy for me. So if you guys want to hear me ask more questions and reveal, oh my gosh, stop licking me. Sorry, for anyone that's not on video, Murphy was just licking my socks. But I definitely open up more about like a couple of things that like I personally have been dealing with that might be shocking that I haven't revealed on the podcast. I really haven't talked to many people about it, honestly, and I felt like this was like the perfect place to, you know, kind of explain what I've been going through and just kind of get like Madison's perspective on it. So definitely tune in to next week to kind of hear more about that. And then one thing, like, which is like such a classic, I feel like Madison and I probably could talk for like 3 years and go on like 700 side tangents. But one thing that she said that she had forgot to mention was, let me pull it up here. I like wrote notes. She's like starting a new kind of like side business with one of her friends who is a therapist. And basically what she was saying that like if like the one-on-one sessions feel like intimidating, in the next like few months she's going to be launching like new workshops. And basically what she was saying is they're like self-guided workshops about basically everything that we talked about in part 1 and part 2. And it's going to be called Self-Seeking School. So if anything that we talked about like is interesting to you, like whether you want to pursue like the one-on-ones or the workshops, definitely just keep an eye on Madison's Instagram. I'll drop it here. It's Groundwork. Let me just double check. Groundwork_coaching. Let me just, yes. Okay. So Groundwork, one word, _coaching is her Instagram. So definitely give her a follow if you want to, you know, stay up to date on that. And like I said, like I really love her content. Like she was saying that she, you know, hasn't been posting, but you can go back and like watch everything that she has already posted. Like I did that yesterday and I was like, oh yeah, I like loved all of these posts. So yeah, so I will, sorry, I'm like just starting a whole new podcast right now, going off on my side tangent. But I will close it out here. You can follow me at Abby McCarville and follow the Oat Pod.
Oh.